Masculinity is not manhood. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that for you. Masculinity is not manhood. As a matter of fact, masculinity often interferes with the full expression of manhood. So whether you are a mother or a daughter or a woman who's seeking male companionship, a father, a son, or a husband, it is vital that you draw a distinction between the two, because the sooner you understand the difference, the sooner you can begin to have healthy relationships, not only within your life, but within your family. And you can begin to contribute to the overall health of your community, a community that is currently plagued with a bunch of boys parading as men. Today on another great episode of Notes to the Sun, we are going to be discussing the difference between masculinity and being a man. I'm your host, KGB. Let's chop it up. I grew up around some tough motherfuckers. I mean, individuals that were the embodiment of masculinity on both sides of my family. My uncles, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, tough as nails, men that worked with their hands, carpenters, mechanics, general contractors, breadwinners, men that hunted, men that fished, men that tended farms, and then brought that shit to the kitchen and barbecued it. These were men's men. If you looked up masculinity in the dictionary, I swear to God, you would find my grandfather. War veterans. These were the men that I was surrounded by. Unfortunately, a lot of them were drinkers and smokers and cussers. Some of them were womanizers. Some of them were criminals. And most unfortunate of all, some of them murderers. But this is what my idea of being a man was growing up. And because my father wasn't there in the home with me, I didn't have that masculine presence in my life that I could mimic. So as I grew up, being deprived of that masculine presence that I could imitate, I often felt as if I were not masculine. And for a young man growing up around that hyper masculine environment, that testosterone filled environment, you start to believe that there's something wrong with you. But I started to make an observation when I became a teenager. And that observation was, despite all that masculinity, a lot of these men were not good fathers. And that posed a serious problem for me, because in my eyes, masculinity and fatherhood were supposed to be one and the same. That you were masculine in preparation for fatherhood. And as a father, the better the father you are, the more masculine you are. I thought there was a positive correlation between the two. I was completely mistaken. The more I loved my wife, the more I loved my children, the more I wanted to provide for them, the more I wanted to protect them, the softer I became. I actually had less of a need to drink and smoke and party and womanize. As I got older, as I became more responsible, ideas of manhood began to shift for me. And I realized that all of those ideas with masculinity, not only were they incorrect, but they were actually acting as an obstacle in my desire to be a man.
What is the difference between manhood and masculinity?
The first thing you need to understand is that masculinity is biological. It is actually rooted in hormones, instincts, and the physical wiring of the male body. It is testosterone, muscle development, competitive drive, sexual impulses. These are all things that are natural. They're not good, they're not bad, they just are. Masculinity to manhood is like it's the raw material, it's the engine, it's the power source. But here's the thing. Raw power without direction is dangerous. Masculinity gives you strength, but it doesn't tell you how to use it. Masculinity gives you aggression, but it doesn't tell you when to use it. It gives you desire, but it doesn't teach you discipline. That's why masculinity alone can't make you a man. It can make you loud, it can make you reckless, it can make you impulsive, but it can't make you responsible. Masculinity is determined by nature. Manhood, on the other hand, is determined by community. So that is why manhood and masculinity must be distinguished from one another. Masculinity is elevated levels of testosterone that can lead to greater muscle mass, aggression, and competitive behaviors. Manhood, on the other hand, is your ability to control that masculinity for the purpose of serving and protecting your family and your community. And your ability to control that masculinity is something that is taught.
The role of rites of passage in shaping manhood.
Many cultures have rites of passage rituals. These rituals are meant to facilitate a boy's transition into manhood. And during these rituals, the elders, the older men of the society, would actually send these young men through a series of rites and initiations to determine whether or not they are worthy of being called men. Being accepted into the camaraderie of men was no small thing. As a matter of fact, your ability to successfully get through these initiations and these rites had a humongous impact, not only on your place in society, but whether or not you got married and who you married. Because unlike today, women back then didn't marry boys. You didn't become a man simply because you grew hair on your balls. Manhood was socially determined. It was taught. It was modeled. It was shaped by the community, the elders, and the standards that they chose to live by. Manhood was not about how strong you were. It was about how strong you made others feel. It was not about how loud you can be, but it was about how clearly you could think. It was not about how many people feared you. It was about how many people trusted you. See, manhood is a code. It is a set of values. It is a way of moving through the world with purpose. Manhood is discipline, responsibility, integrity, self-control, service to others, and emotional maturity. You got to remember that manhood is earned. It is masculinity that is inherited. And here's the truth. If a boy never learns the difference, he'll actually just end up being a grown-ass male with child impulses, a male with a whole lot of power, but no willpower. You may think that you're a man because you own a gun, but unless you are using that gun to defend your family, your community, and your nation, unless you are using that gun to hunt for food to put on the table of your family, then you are just simply being masculine. And a dog can be masculine, but a dog can't be a man. You may think that you're a man because you fight. But unless you fight for your community, unless you fight for your family, then you are just simply being masculine. You think that being a man means going around fucking whoever you want to, however you want to. But if you cannot raise that child, if you cannot support that child, if you cannot be in the home and watch that child grow up, if you cannot be there to make sure that that young child goes through their own rites of passage where they learn the rights and the rituals of being a man and a woman, then you are not being a man. You are simply being masculine. The reason why the Black community has so much masculinity within it and so little manhood is not because we as Black men have decided that we want to shirk our responsibilities as men, but rather those institutions that were in place to determine manhood have been systematically destroyed and taken from us. The institution of slavery denied us the ability to channel our masculinity in a way that allowed us to protect our families, that allowed us to protect our communities. And in the absence of those institutions, those rituals, and those rights that determine manhood, we began to lean on masculinity as the sole expression of who and what we were. So now manhood for our communities is simply nothing more than the expression of competitiveness and aggression. So it is up to us as Black men, as Black fathers, to redefine what it means to actually be a man, to reestablish those rituals and those rights so that we can transition our boys into manhood properly. It is important to us because the presence of a father has so many benefits in the development of young men that we can no longer allow those benefits to become ignored. Our children, when we are not there, they account for 85% of the children that are in prison. When we are not there, our children account for 85% of children with behavioral disorders. When we are not there, our children account for 71% of high school dropouts. And worst of all, when we are not there, our children account for 63% of all youth suicides. We have to be there first before we can teach them anything.
Is it possible for a woman to raise a boy into a man?
We've all heard the question, can a woman raise a boy into a man? And I've heard all different types of stories, both sides of the coin. This has always been an interesting topic for me, mainly because I was raised by a woman. And I can say emphatically that yes, a woman can absolutely raise a man. However, there is one slight problem. I want you all to think about masculinity kind of like water, right? In that water has three different phases. It is gas, liquid, and solid. In its gas form, the water molecules are apart, they're separated, they're kind of free flowing, they're not really connected and condensed, they're all over the place. I want you to see testosterone in a young boy as being that. He's all over the place, no real direction, just kind of floating. And the thing about gas is that water becomes gas when it is heated. So a hormone-filled boy is in heat. He's hot, all right? He's all over the place. He's unfocused. He's not connected. Now, what a woman does is a woman cools that down. That's what a woman does. It's the same thing that she does for a young lady. She cools her femininity down. A woman cools the masculinity down in a young boy. And what ultimately happens is when all of that heat gets cooled down, it goes into a liquid form. Now, the great thing about a liquid is it's a lot more manageable than it is in its gas form. So when a child is born, it's all over the place. I'm hungry, I want to eat. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna cry. I feel like using the bathroom, I'm just shit on myself. Do whatever I want to do. And it is the nurturing, it is the education, it is the love of a woman that actually directs all of that heat into a way that is focused and productive. The woman teaches the baby how to walk, how to talk. The woman teaches the baby how she potty trains him. She brings all of that heat down into a more manageable shape. And this is the liquid form of a young boy's masculinity. Now, here's the problem with the liquid form is the same problem with water. It takes the shape of its container. It has no shape. It only takes the shape of its container. And when a boy is left alone in this liquid shape, he will take the shape of any container that is holding him. So a woman who raises a young boy runs the risk that once he is in that liquid form, he will take the shape of whatever container holds him. And if she is in the hood and the container that is holding him are gangbangers, that is the shape he will take. And this is where man comes in. A man's role is not to give that young boy something different than what his mother gave him. A man's role is to solidify what the mother gave him. Masculinity, when it is cooled. Masculinity, when it receives the touch of a woman, will cool down. It will begin to take shape, but that shape will not hold. And that is where a man is required, because a man is the solid form, the ice, cold, emotionalist, reasoning side of that young man's development that will harden him. Look at a woman as the sculptor, the person that takes that raw piece of clay and molds it into something beautiful. And then look at a man as the oven. It is the thing that she hands over. She hands her work of art to the oven, and the oven will burn it, but the oven will also make that work of art strong. And that is the result of, that is the role of the father, to harden the work of art of the mother. And so can a woman raise a young man? Absolutely. But she runs the risk of her creation not being hardened. She runs the risk of her work not sticking. She runs the risk of her work being soft. And that is why men are so absolutely necessary. It is a partnership. It is not a conflict. Men, you are not here to replace the teachings of mom. You are not in conflict with the teachings of mom. Your role as a man is to harden the teachings of mom, to make sure that the love and the nurturing and the lessons that she gave that child all the way up to puberty, that those lessons stick. It is a partnership between two individuals to make sure that a boy properly transitions into manhood. This is the role of a father. He is the bridge between masculinity and manhood. He teaches a boy how to take all that raw energy and make it stick. Mom shapes it into something productive, and dad holds it together.
Fatherhood actually lowers testosterone and tames masculinity.
Did you know that when a young man goes through puberty, his testosterone levels will elevate 10 to 20 times as much as that of a young girl? Which is the reason why after puberty, young boys tend to be more aggressive and more competitive in their behaviors because of those elevated levels of testosterone. But biology gives them the aggression. It doesn't tell them what to do with it. You see, a father teaches him when to fight, when to walk away, when to speak up, when to stay silent, when to protect, when to humble yourself. A father teaches a boy that strength is not proven by domination, but by restraint. You see, without that guidance, aggression becomes misdirected. It becomes anger. It becomes frustration. It becomes violence. It becomes insecurity disguised as toughness. A father also teaches emotional regulation, not don't feel, but feel it and control it. We don't teach them man up, but stand up. We don't teach them to stop crying, but don't let your emotions control your decisions. This is what a man does. And let's be real, in many Black communities, fatherhood has been disrupted by systems of circumstances, by generational wounds. But even when a biological father is absent, fatherhood can still show up through mentors, uncles, coaches, elders, and community leaders. Boys don't just need a man in the house, they need a man in their life. Because masculinity without guidance becomes, what's that? Those gases? Chaos. Manhood without mentorship, it's just guesswork. In 2021, there was a study. There was these young bull elephants that were tearing up this enclosure that they were in. So it was a zoo or some type of situation that had an enclosure of elephants. And the young bull elephants were just destroying the shit out of the enclosure. More importantly, they were fighting all the time and they were acting really aggressive towards the female elephants. And so the zookeepers, the individuals that were in charge of the elephants, didn't know what to do. And so they finally decided that they would bring in an older bull elephant and see if that might work. And within a week, all of the aggressive behavior of the younger bull elephants, all of the harassment that they were doing towards the female elephants, and all the destruction that they were doing to the enclosure had completely stopped. The research had proven that the presence of an older bull elephant significantly curbed the destructive masculine behavior of the younger male elephants. A recent study by Harvard of some young Filipino boys found out that when they had a father present in their life, when they got older as men, they actually had lower testosterone levels than their peers who did not have fathers around. So fatherhood actually lowers testosterone. It does not increase it. That's why I say you have to draw the distinction between masculinity and manhood, because manhood is actually in competition with masculinity. Manhood is in competition with testosterone. It controls it. It limits it. And so if you as a woman are attracted to the masculine expression of these males, then when it comes time for them to be fathers, they will have all of the traits of masculinity and none of the traits of fatherhood. They will be aggressive. They will be competitive. They will be in search of conflict. They will be in search of reproduction. They will be in search. All of the things that you claim you hate when he is yours are the things that you were attracted to when he wasn't. You can't have it both ways. If you want a man, then you got to be attracted to a man. You can't be attracted to a boy and then expect him to be a man the moment that he gives you a child. He was a boy when you met him. He's going to be a boy after he has that child. If you want a man, find out what are the traits of a man and be attracted to that. Be attracted to someone who volunteers in his community. Be attracted to someone who teaches young men. Be attracted to somebody who takes care of his family. Be attracted to somebody that protects his mother. Be attracted to somebody who's not a menace to society. Be attracted to someone who's not selling drugs in their community and not shooting people in their community. Be attracted to someone who places love over conquest, who places cooperation above competition, who places responsibility above reproduction. So in conclusion, If masculinity is natural and manhood is taught, how do you grow manhood intentionally? Here's a couple of things that you as sons, you as fathers, you as mothers can take with you.
Action plan for this week's episode.
A, make sure that young man seeks mentorship. Find men who live the way you want that child to live. Not perfect men, disciplined men. Teach your child to practice emotional discipline, not to suppress their emotions, but to how to feel those emotions, recognize those emotions, and then focus those emotions in a positive way. This idea of sucking it up and manning up, that's masculine. That is not manhood. As a matter of fact, suicide rates increased 60% for young men who were raised in homes with emotionally absent fathers. The reason why is because in those environments, they're not taught how to properly manage their emotions. They're taught the masculine thing to do, which is suppress it, hold it in. You got to make sure that we practice emotional discipline. Teach them to feel everything, but react to nothing. Respond with intention. Then we need to also teach them to take responsibility early. That your life changes the moment you stop blaming and you start owning. Teach them to control their impulses. A man who cannot control himself will eventually be controlled by his consequences. Serve something bigger than himself. Teach them about family and community and purpose, and teach them that manhood grows when he contributes to those things. Make sure that they are volunteering and doing things to make their community a better place to live. Make sure that they're doing things to make sure that their homes are more beautiful. And then also teach them to build an inner code. Decide for themselves what they will stand for. And lastly, if there's a rites of passage program in your community, make sure you participate in it and you have your child participate in it. And if you do not have a child that qualifies because they may be overage or underage for that rites of passage program, then you yourself volunteer to make sure that you help transition someone from boyhood into manhood. Remember what I said before, masculinity is the fire, but manhood is the fireplace. One burns wild, the other warms the home. Young kings, your biology is what gives you power, but it is your choices that will give you an identity. And if no one has ever told you this, you are capable of becoming a man of discipline, purpose, and strength, not because the world says so, because you have decided so. Not because nature says that you are a man, because you stood up and you said, I'm going to be a man. Thank you for listening to Notes to the Sun. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a young brother who needs it. Until next time, stay focused, grounded, and stay growing. I'm your host, KGB. Take care.